What's going on, Blue Liners? Joel here. Today we're going to do another video in our series of getting better at fly fishing, getting started. Super excited for today. We're going to be talking about some topics that was really hard for me to kind of grasp when I first started. That being fly fishing terminology and the jargon that people throw around. When they're talking about fly fishing. There's a lot of stuff I didn't understand, didn't even know what it was, and hopefully today we can help you guys out with that issue if that is one for you guys. Today we're going to start off talking about the different categories of flies that are out there. The typical ones that you see people use. First off, we're going to talk about dry flies. Dry fly is any fly that is used above the surface or that floats on top of the water. And I'll have some examples here below. Essentially, any floating fly is considered a dry fly, whether that be like poppers or saltwater gurglers, mayfly dries like parachute Adams, elk-ear caddis, stuff like that. Those are all dry flies. Next, we're going to go on to nymphs. Nymphs are any flies that are fished below the surface, generally dead drifted, to imitate an insect or aquatic invertebrate that was swept away by the current and is just floating around in the water at the speed of the current. I have a few examples of nymphs here. They are all used the same way, dead drifted under an indicator or Euro net. All right, next is streamers. Streamers are any sort of subsurface fly. They're subsurface, sort of like nymphs, but they're a lot bigger, usually imitating bait fish or other types of larger prey, including like crayfish or shrimp if you're saltwater, or anything else that's a little bigger that fish would be chasing. So the difference between a streamer and a nymph is that with a streamer, you're usually invoking some sort of action into the fly to induce a predatory reaction from the game fish you're chasing. I have a few examples of streamers here. And this one is actually called a dungeon, a mini dungeon, and it is an articulated fly. If you see the two joints there, then you will see that it is articulated, and that's just another type of streamer that is pretty popular. A dungeon's a very popular streamer fly. Next, you have wet flies. Wet flies are flies that will be fished under the surface. They're fished a lot like streamers. They're pretty good crossover between nymphs and streamers, I'd say. A lot of times people swing them in the current they cast it out diagonally in the water and let the water just kind of swing it down. It's not generally dead drifted. You can do that, but or they'll have it swung down and strip it in like a streamer. They're a lot smaller than streamers usually. Sometimes they look sort of like I said, it's a pretty decent hybrid between nymphs and streamers. Wet flies, I have a lot of old classic flies that are wet flies. I have some here that are more classic today wet flies, and then there's some that are a lot more vintage style flies that people even use today for salmon and such. Next, we'll talk about our last flies being emergers. This is sort of a nitpicky, one. Don't necessarily have to tell you guys about emergers because they're sort of a nymph, but what they do is emergers are going to be fished just under the surface. They're essentially a midge that's in a later stage in life. They're essentially coming up to the surface to get ready to hatch. A lot of times they get caught under the surface film of the water, so they're trapped under there and they become a very easy target for a trout to key in on. So emergers are essentially nymphs that are fished just under the surface. They may even have a little bit of flotation in them just to keep them right below the surface. Or you can use gink, which is a floatant. You apply it to your leader, all the way up to a certain point, and then just have 2 or 3 inches of unginked leader that'll go below the surface. This is very popular with like midges, pupa, and stuff like that. Midge emergers. Even caddis emergers. Caddis emergers can actually, they can actually kind of dance in the water too. So, all right. So next we have your fly line. Fly line is essentially the entire reason you're able to fly fish in the first place. Fly line was invented a long time ago when fly fishing first came about to be able to carry small flies such as small nymphs or dry flies out to trout that are feeding on insects tinier than your pinky nail. Initially, people were using weighted lures to cast their lines and lures out a distance, but when people figured out what trout were keying in on, a lot of times they're keying on these really small insects. They didn't have enough mass to cast a normal fishing line out. So they invented the fly line to do that for them. Essentially, you use the mass of the fly line to carry your small fly out to the trout. And that is how fly fishing was invented, the reason, and then extrapolated into chasing all the sport fish in the entire world, using big streamers and stuff. But pretty cool. Fly line is the thick part, often the colorful part on your rod and reel that you essentially use to cast. So like this green part right here is the fly line. All spooled up on the reel is also fly line. Fly line also varies in weights because you have to match the weight of your rod. A good rule of thumb is to match everything up with your weights. So if you have a 7-weight like this is, a 7-weight reel, you want a 7-weight rod, you want a 7-weight line. We can go into the nuances of that. Some people like to size up or size down their fly lines for certain applications. But starting out, I would recommend just getting all matching fly weights for your setup. All right, so next is the leader and tippet. The leader is the clear piece of fishing line that you see. If you've been fishing before, you're familiar with fishing, it's the piece that looks like normal fishing line. But that is the leader. It's the piece of line that connects your fly line to your fly. Now, the very last piece of your leader that connects your leader to your fly is your tippet. And there's an entire tippet scale that confused the fire out of me when I first started. Going from 0x to 7x, just all the different sizes confused me entirely. And that's something I'm going to get into today a little bit with you guys, maybe to help you guys out, because I was so confused when I was trying to figure out what size tippet to use on my fly setup to go after trout. I assumed that 5x was bigger than 0x and all that, and didn't know what the actual weight was. Coming from a normal fishing background, was a fishing 2-pound test, or was it like 10 pounds, or what was it? So now going into the tippet scale, you go from 0x all the way up to 8x. Some people even do 12x, but I would recommend to never use 12x. There's no point really, unless you're just wanting to break a personal record for yourself. I don't know. But the tippet scale goes from 0x to 8x in most situations. 0x is usually about 15 to 16 pounds. Going all the way up to 8x, which should be about only like 1.5, 1.25 pounds. Very light stuff, which, the fly rod absorbs most of that, so you're actually able to play fish on lighter lines such as 8x. But rule of thumb, tippet gets smaller as the tippet number gets bigger. So 0x is a lot thicker and heavier than 8x, or 0x is a lot heavier than 3x. A typical size tippet for trout on tailwaters that are fished often is going to be about 5x. If you're out in blue lining, then maybe a 3x or 4x would be suitable for your application. Next piece of equipment we would be talking about would be indicators. Indicators essentially is a fly fisherman's glorified bobber. There's not really much difference other than a couple different strike indicators would be this one, such as this airlock. They got a couple others where they screw on like this. My favorite is a New Zealand strike indicator, which is a piece of yarn. It's very delicate and does not spook fish when it lands on the water, especially in shallower applications. Okay, another one that I've already used today, but you may hear very often from people, is getting a dead drift or a drag-free drift. Now, what is a dead drift or a drag-free drift? It is what happens whenever you cast into a riffle or a run in a river, which is the fast-moving parts of a river, and you are having your flying indicator going the exact same speed as the water there, and it's not dragging to the left or right. It's as if you just dropped it in the water with nothing attached and it was just floating away. So a good way to make sure you're getting a drag-free drift is see some bubbles in the water, which there's always bubbles in the water in faster areas, or just an object such as a leaf. If your indicator is going the exact same speed and direction as that leaf that's next to it, then you are getting a drag-free drift. And congratulations, that is a first step to getting good presentation for trout. Presentation is one of the most important aspects of catching trout on a fly rod, and if you're able to get a good drag-free drift, then that will up your chances way more. not getting a good drag-free drift or dead drift can be detrimental a lot of times to your success in the water. There are times and occasions when certain hatches, such as emerging caddis, may be kind of springing up in the water. Maybe they may be more active and will bite a moving fly that's not dead drifted. It can happen, but just a rule of thumb, you do want to learn to get a good dead drift. A part of fly fishing that'll help you get a good dead drift would be to mend. A mend is whenever you flick part of your fly line in the direction of your fly or indicator, could be dry fly or indicator, to put some slack in the line that will help the water not drag your fly line. Because when the water starts to drag your fly line, then it will drag your fly or indicator. In result, you lose your dead drift and a fish will not bite often. So the way we combat the water dragging your fly line away is by mending your fly line, and that is you're just lifting up your fly rod fairly quickly when you have some slack, and you basically flick your fly line up above in the current so it has some more time before it starts to drag your fly or indicator. And a good rule of thumb is if the fly is downstream of you or indicator is downstream of you, then you'll want to mend downstream with that fly. And if the fly is still upstream of you, then you'll want to mend upstream. So whatever direction on the river your indicator or fly is of you in your position, you'll want to mend in that direction. Now, I said I wasn't going to get into casting a whole lot, and I'm still not going to in this particular video, but a forehand cast and a backhand cast are essentially the exact same thing, except for, like it's worded, a forehand cast is when you're casting forward, backhand cast is when you're casting backwards. They should be in a mirror image as far as the loop goes, which is our next term. A loop is, say you're casting and you're casting backwards. So you're casting backwards and you're going to go forwards. Whenever you're going forwards, you're creating a loop after your back cast, and then it unravels. Once it unravels, you can cast forward again. Like I was saying earlier, presentation is super duper important. And if you want to learn how to catch more fish, I've got a video here about presentation, and it will sure help you out getting you ready to catch fish out the wazoo. So I appreciate you guys. Make sure to click on that video and tight lines.